What's been up with this trend recently of just making random sequels to movies that didn't need sequels? We had Ice Age 5 in 2016, which was awful, The Nut Job 2 in 2017, which was actually a bit of a surprise for me in how average it was compared to awful, and now we have Sherlock Gnomes, the sequel to 2011's Romeo and Juliet. If you've never seen the original movie, then you're not missing out on much. It's just a kid-friendly version of Romeo and Juliet with garden gnomes. I didn't actually see the movie until around the time this movie came out in cinemas, and I found it surprisingly decent. Not great, just decent enough for kids. But this movie has been bashed to a bloody pulp for being cringy, unnecessary, and annoying. If that in part was thanks to the trailers, I can't blame anyone really. The trailers for the movie were just abysmal, and probably turned a lot of people off in wanting to see it. Since most people tend to see a trailer for a movie before watching said movie, it's gonna give them the impression that the movie itself is outright abysmal. After seeing it, I got exactly what I expected. Sherlock Gnomes isn't an awful movie, but it's just mediocre. In fact, I can't tell the age group this movie's aimed for, but I'll get to that later. The plot is about the gnomes moving to a new garden in London, until one day an evil villain kidnaps all the gnomes apart from Romeo and Juliet, until the well-known Sherlock Gnomes comes with his sidekick Watson to try and solve the case and see where all the gnomes were captured. Since this is a movie that gets so much hate from the viewing public, I decided to start with the positives. The animation easily has the most effort put into it. The gnomes' design and texture looks great, the backgrounds aesthetically fit the mood perfectly, the action scenes are engaging, characters like the gargoyles have good textures and nice designs, and my favorite thing about the whole movie, whenever it goes into Sherlock's mind, it has 2D animation instead of 3D. There's nothing to scream about unless it's something from Laika or Pixar, but the animators did the best with what they were given. Sherlock Gnomes and Watson are decent characters actually. In fact, I wish the movie was more focused on them. All the subplots do nothing for me, but if we took all these out and just had this as a Sherlock Holmes kids film, it could have actually been pretty decent. I know Sherlock can be a bit of an asshole throughout the film, but he did get a few laughs out of me, and Johnny Depp does do a good job, but I don't need to say who his voice reminded me of. That's really about it when it comes to the positives. The story is thin structurally and tends to hold few surprises and even less twists. Sure, there's like 2 twists that happen during the movie, but it's something that people can see coming a mile away. And much like Ice Age 5, this movie has way too many characters crammed in. Apart from the main story with Sherlock and Watson, too many subplots are involved that don't fit in this plot. I don't care if this is a sequel to Romeo and Juliet, there does not need to be this much character milking. There's a subplot where Romeo and Juliet are about to become the new leaders of the gnomes, and they spend most of the movie fighting about it. It goes absolutely nowhere and doesn't benefit anything. There's a subplot with Benny who has a crush on Nanette and he must confess that he loves her. It goes absolutely nowhere and, again, doesn't benefit anything. It also gets bonus points for being the most obnoxious plot on the whole movie because Nanette spends most of the time just screaming and shouting most of her dialogue. The problem is that I don't care about these subplots and seem like excuses to drag the movie to its runtime. Why couldn't it spend more time developing Gnomes and Watson's partnership? Why can't it give more Holmes lore to kids who may not know about it to begin with? Why can't it just focus on being a silly family film without the sappy romance and cringy modern slang? And need I bring up Moriarty, the main antagonist of the movie? Not only does his voice acting feel very lightweight compared to how he normally sounds.
Yeah, today's that day. Come, Sherlock. Come dance with me.
Reardon is the key to what Blackwood was doing. He's essential to my plan.
But design-wise, what the hell is he supposed to be? The movie claims he's a pie mascot, but he doesn't even look like one. Did Moriarty ever have some sort of connection to pies? Was that in his character? I don't know, because the movie never elaborates on it. It's too focused on trying to be hip and funny with the kid. While the writing isn't as bad as the trailer made it out to be, it can still get pretty damn annoying. I also hope this movie didn't get released in Asia, because there's an entire sequence dedicated to an Asian type restaurant, and I can see that feeling very offensive to people from the country. And this is considering the last film I looked at, Isle of Dogs, got more controversy than this movie could. And with all the problems I've been bringing up, it actually perfectly sums up my biggest flaw with Sherlock Gnomes. It doesn't seem to know what it's trying to do with itself. It tries to appeal to both children and adults, but it's tonally inconsistent that it loses track of itself very quickly. The film tends to be too childish for adults to the point where any bad joke will make them groan, but it's also confusing for younger audiences because most are probably unfamiliar with Sherlock Holmes, so they might find the Holmesian references going over their head. But I guess at the end of the day, Sherlock Gnomes is just mediocre. Not awful, but not good either. I don't hate it as much as the critics do, but I also didn't like it enough to consider it a guilty pleasure. If it had just focused on the adventure side with Holmes and Watson taking up 90% of the film's runtime, this could have actually been a decent movie for kids. But with all the pointless subplots, desperate attempts to seem modern, and uncomfortable amount of characters crammed into it, it's just a bland movie that I guess I can see kids enjoying, but just make sure they have headphones on while watching it. But if you really want your kids to see a good animated film with Sherlock Holmes at the forefront, I'd be better off watching The Great Mouse Detective instead.